from infirmities and disabilities, loose from all that hinders me. Nothing can hold me now. I'm standing on solid ground. The word of the Lord. I've got the victory over my enemies. Who the Son sets free is free indeed. My chains are broken. Thank God I am loose. Oh yes I am. Yes I am. I am loose. Oh yes I am. Yes I am. I am loose.
Well, hello and welcome Salem Bible Church. My name is Marcus Jones, licensed psychotherapist, certified alcohol and drug counselor, certified anger management specialist. To the congregation of Salem Bible Church, thank you all for allowing me to come into your space and present you with this information. To Senior Pastor Dr. Joseph Williams and Pastor Emeritus Jasper Williams Jr., thank you for this opportunity and allowing me to present this information before your congregation. And it's both an honor and a privilege. Let us talk about the character flaw in patience. We shall start off by discussing the more obvious things of impatience. That being the root word of impatience being patience. The definition of impatience is the ability to wait or tolerate a delay, trouble, or suffering without engaging in self-defeating behaviors. That will be our workable definition as we discuss impatience. Now that was the definition of patience. Let us discuss impatience. The IM is the prefix in impatience, which denotes either the opposite of or the lack of. In this case, it would be either the opposite of patience or the lack of impatience. One may assume the definition of impatience being the lack of impatience. But impatience entails more than just the opposite of being the opposite of patience or the lack of impatience or the lack of patience rather. Impatience has a lot of other elements to it. At face value, we may think that impatience comes after patience. We may think that patience is our most natural reaction to engaging. If impatience comes after patience, that would denote a process counterproductive to growth. Now, if you looked at impatience preceding patience, you would be denoting a process of growth. Impatience is its own entity and standalone process. It is a very particular element in our mental and physical processes. It stands as its own entity. Impatience has its triggers. Impatience is deeply rooted in frustration. Impatience and frustration are self-defeating. Impatience shows different characteristics. These characteristics being opposite of patience. So let us we'll come back to the characteristics of impatience in a second. Let us address the characteristics of patience, or let us discuss patience. The Latin word for patience is patientia. Patientia would denote endurance, submission, and experiencing. Endurance would be defined as the power to endure without yielding. Submission would be the state of obedience. And experiencing would be observing, interacting, and intimacy with the process. We will utilize those definitions as workable definitions as we go through this discussion. Now going back to impatience. As I stated earlier, impatience is deeply rooted in frustration. Some of the characteristics of impatience are intolerance, stubbornness, rebelliousness, restlessness, unawareness, and ignorance. Those are the characteristics of impatience. Think about some of those characteristics, namely stubbornness, namely rebelliousness, namely intolerance. Those are all characteristics in which we may see play out in relationships. Any marriage and family therapist, any couples counselor, any individual or clinician that engages in therapy specializing in intimate relationships would tell you that relationships take patience, and there is a level of patience that must be exercised in relationships. And at the root of impatience in those relationships, you may find the characteristics of stubbornness, intolerance, rebelliousness, and restlessness. That is because impatience can have a total effect in our lives. Impatience can affect our reputation. Impatience can also affect our relationships. Impatience, being deeply rooted in frustration, means that it sits at the core of our emotions. Our emotions are triggered by thoughts. Our thoughts are derived from our experience or situations in which we are presented. For an example, consider the business owner that owns a business. In the business, as he's doing his accounting, finds that the revenue does not cover his expenses, his or hers expenses. And so then this situation triggers a thought. In mental health, we are all familiar with the term schema or schemas. Schemas are absolute or dichotomous thoughts in which we take and we fill those unknowns with those thoughts. Typically, there are things in which we discuss concerning our future. So for the business owner, an example of a schema would be, this business is going to fail no matter what I do. That is a schema. That then creates the emotion of frustration and rises to impatience. That then what happens is based off of those emotions, then there's a behavior. A decisive action. That business owner can go and get a regular job and stop their business and give up on their business or quit on their business. That business owner could sell their business. But their reaction is based of the emotion of frustration and impatience. Impatience. When you are impatient, you are rejecting the present moment. It is a rejection of the process. You are rejecting reality. Impatience brings about a realization. That realization, when we become impatient, we realize that whatever process in which we are engaging requires more of a sacrifice than we initially predicted we would have to sacrifice. We realize that there's more of a sacrifice than we thought it would be. We have all fallen guilty to impatience. Whether it was skipping a step in the process, whether it was quitting on a process, whether it was displaying our behavior in anger. Impatience and frustration are self-defeating. Think about baking. The difference between a sunken cake and a cake that rises to its full potential is patience. Patience is an important element in baking. There are very particular steps that one must go through when baking to ensure that the cake rises to full potential. You cannot skip a step when it comes to baking, because the end result could suffer. From allowing your yeast to sit if you're baking bread, to whisking flour, butter, and sugar together for a smooth consistency, it takes patience. Impatience occurs when we feel that our needs are not being met. Our needs are being ignored. If impatience is rooted in frustration, then frustration is attached to our defense mechanisms, our natural defense mechanisms, which would then go into my notion that impatience precedes patience, because impatience comes more natural to us, because it attaches to our defense mechanisms. We have grown accustomed in our world today to impatience. From the advancements in technology has given us instant access to communication, instant access to data. Technology has made everything available at our fingertips. It has eliminated the process of obtaining. We have grown accustomed to instant gratification. Which increases our level of frustration and impatience. Think about your vehicle. It's no longer just an AM/FM radio. It's a Bluetooth radio. Or you have an auxiliary cord, which allows you to make calls, allows you to speak to the radio, to play your music. Everything happens in an instant. From technology to our food. Think about the difference of cooking rice in a pot to cooking instant rice, put in a bag inside of water in a microwave. Everything has become instant. fast food restaurants are billion dollar industries. No longer do you have to go through the process of cooking. You can just pull in the drive-through at every corner. Everything at an instant. There are characteristics in patience. As we discussed, the Latin term for patience is patientia, which encompasses characteristics of endurance, submission, and experiencing. Endurance is the power to endure without yielding. Submission is the state of being obedient. And experiencing is observing, interacting, and becoming intimate with the process. There is a level of awareness in patience. I would submit to you that not only is patience a virtue, patience is an ability that encompasses a set of virtues. Those virtues being self-control, humility, generosity, and mercy. If you look up different definitions of patience, you're going to find in most definitions 2 words are common: ability and capacity. As counselors in the field of counseling, we teach patience as a coping skill. I may see individuals who may have depression, generalized anxiety disorder. And most times, in those situations, there's required a level of patience. As a therapist, at times you find yourself teaching coping skills, and patience being one of those coping skills, and it may be in the form of actual skills that you practice or encourage the practice of with the client. Impatience is derived from our internal thoughts and processes. As we discussed earlier, there are thoughts that then trigger those emotions. Those emotions then go into a behavior. Most of the time we react based off of those emotions, and most people that react based off of their emotions are impulsive. We've all been guilty of engaging in self-defeating actions or behaviors. For something as simple as you waiting in line, a long line, and you get out of that long line, get into another line, but then find out that it took just as long in that line than it was in a line prior. Think about that time you was at the grocery store and the line you got in was long, and based off the fact that the line was long, and you were like, this line is gonna take too long, and then you got in a shorter line, but the shorter line took just as long because the woman in front had 2 full carts of groceries. So either way, it would have took just as long. We have all been guilty of engaging in either wanting to short a step, quitting on a process, impatience and frustration are self-defeating. With patience, you are able to develop, think, plan, and develop a well thought out process. With patience, there is awareness. Awareness is the referee between your emotions and your behavior. That is how you build patience. Patience is built through awareness. When we teach emotion regulation in therapy, cognitive awareness is one of the things that we teach. That process requires a level of patience. As we go through our cognitive processes, when individuals become frustrated with a process, our defense mechanism makes us impatient, and then we react. We think that there is a need for immediate reaction. Impatience is rejecting the process. Impatience is rejecting the present moment. It's rejecting reality. Impatience is known to increase stress, to escalate a difficult situation. It can cause issues in your relationships. And it can hurt your reputation. Think about what's happening in our world today. COVID-19 has forced us to go into a process because we have lost certain luxuries of being able to travel wherever we want, to engage in social gatherings wherever we want, no matter how many people were there. We're now stricken to either being in our homes, not being able to get out as we used to. We have to social distance, put on a mask. Researchers have developed the term COVID fatigue. These are for individuals who have grown impatient with the process. This was to explain the behavior of individuals who were intolerant or rebellious with the process of moving toward total immunity. These are the individuals who go to parties, fail to social distance, don't wear a mask. But it also applies to individuals who have had an increased amount of stress due to COVID-19. Mental health hospitals have seen individuals with increased symptoms of depression to the extent of suicidal ideation. There were 81,000 overdose deaths in 2020, more than any preceding year. Individuals with addictive disease had started relapsing. These are all due to reactions of impatience with the process. Impatience and frustration are self-defeating. Growing from impatience to patience takes a level of awareness. It's a process in which we go through to change our thinking, to change our mindset, which is a set of attitudes. So it's a process. That is how you build the power to endure, motivate yourself to be submissive to the process and aware of yourself and the situation. Patience is the difference between a sunken cake or the cake that rises to its full potential. I can remember when I played football, at the end of practice, coach would tell us to do 50 hills. So we would get on a hill, up the hill, back down was one. Until I remember a time we were doing 50 hills. It was leg day in practice. Meaning we did legs in the weight room first. And then we went outside and we ran. And so we were going to do our 50 hills. And as we were doing our 50 hills, one of the offensive linemen had yelled out, "Coach, I'm tired, man, and I'm thirsty." And the coach said back to him, "That water's sitting in cold ice getting prepared for you to drink it. The longer you wait, the sweeter it'll taste when you drink it." Patience in the process helps for a better outcome. It ensures your readiness when it's time. Awareness is what builds into patience. We have grown to think that impatience is what is needed and that patience is taking a backseat role. when patience itself is a process of learning and growing. Impatience and frustration are self-defeating. Patience helps you to think, plan, and develop. Impatience, you become more aware of self. Thank you, Salem Bible Church, for allowing me this time to present to you. Again, my name is Marcus Jones, licensed psychotherapist, certified alcohol and drug counselor. If you are seeking therapy services, you can find me on therapyforblackmen.com, or you can find me on Open Path Collective. I am also the host on 102.6 of Situation Radio's Mental Health Mondays. You can also find me on YouTube. My YouTube channel is Holistic Partners Network. I am also on Instagram as @Marcus Mental Health. Thank you again.
I am loose from infirmities and disabilities, loose from all that hinders me. Nothing can hold me now. I'm standing on solid ground. The word of the Lord. I've got the victory over my enemies. Who the sun sets free is free indeed. My chains are broken. Thank God.